Hello and welcome to today's episode. Today we have an amazing guest. We have Tracy Fance, who is an intuitive. So we are going down the woo-woo path. We are talking about crystals, we talk about tarot, and we really dig into being intuitive and trusting yourself because that is really important. She shares some amazing stories. Shares some experiences, as well as giving us a load of tools to help us to really start to hear that little whisper of helping you to understand or learn to listen to your intuition and your gut feelings. And I love the way she explains things. She uses some amazing phrasing and wording like smorgasbord. I mean, we don't have many guests who use a word like that. So grab a cuppa and come and listen to this really intuitive and informative conversation all about the woo-woo, but it's not too woo-wooing so that not everybody can listen to it or understand it. So let's now dig into this really beautiful conversation.
But before we get started, please do us a favor. Hit subscribe, follow us, join us, let us know if you've listened, comment, do all those wonderful things that help us spread the podcast to more listeners. If you can help us spread the word, we would be really, really grateful. It gives us good feels, it gives you good feels, and gives everyone lots of information. So thank you so much for subscribing, and let's go with the episode. Hi, Tracy. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Really great. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited.
We're excited to have you as well. So, to get us started, I always ask our guests to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, but I'm also usually curious about what got you onto this path. So, rather than reciting your bio, it's more about why have you been inspired to go on this path, to follow the journey that you are on, and we will then basically dive deep into what it is that you do.
Well, as a child, I had lots of weird experiences that I didn't really understand. One of them I just thought was the tooth fairy, but it turns out it was spirit visiting. But my 4 or 5 year old self didn't really get that that was a thing. Um, and I just remember having two big questions as a kid. I don't know why. The first one was like, what happens when we die? Which I think is probably a fairly typical question that kids ask their parents. And the other question was kind of like, is there more to life than you're born, you suffer, you die? That's it. And I was just like, oh, there's got to be more. And so those two questions sent me looking for answers. I was so desperate to be psychic, which is ironic because I really believe everybody is psychic and intuitive. I thought it was something only special people had. So I desperately went looking to find out how I could be psychic. And to answer those questions, even though I'm not sure at the time that I realised that's what was driving me forwards, but I'd had those questions so young, I just think they became part of me. And here I am many years later. Um, and I'm still on that path with more questions than answers, if I'm honest.
I think that's the beauty of life, realizing that the more we know how much we don't know. It's the
Absolutely.
realization that every time we learn something new, it's like cool. Obviously, we have a wealth of knowledge, but we also realize all the areas where we don't know and how many rabbit holes we could go into and the depth and detail of other areas we could explore. It's so interesting to hear you say kind of already kind of feeling and knowing that you want to be psychic because for lots of people it's kind of it either happens to them that they know they are psychic and they know that they have these abilities beyond that they feel these connections or people who are pretty much oblivious to them. And I've never met anyone who would be like, I know it exists. I really want it, but I don't know how to get it, or I'm on a path of getting it. What have you done on the journey then to help yourself to unlock some of these powers, to discover some of these abilities, to lean more into, as you said, everyone has them, but we are no longer born and raised to really be empowering these skills and tapping into them. We as humankind are kind of pushing those things often to the side. So I'm curious,
Mm.
in the world that we live in, what have been the things that helped you on this journey to discover them and unlock them a little bit more?
Okay, so as a child, bearing in mind that I really didn't understand this, we didn't have Harry Potter, so nobody was really into witches and wizards and all of that kind of thing, really, unless they were a bit woo-woo or weird. But I kept this massively deep fascination with reincarnation. I was reading books on that when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I was still doing Janet and John and the Mister Men, but I was reading about reincarnation and aliens and spontaneous combustion. We did the normal stupid stuff like childhood ghost hunts, and we made our own Ouija board, which God knows what possessed us to try that. Um, and then as I got older, as I say, I had this massive thing about I just want to be psychic. And I had no understanding of what it involved. I think I just thought that if I was psychic, I would know about it. Could always have these big visions like Cassandra from the Greek myths, or I would shake hands with somebody and know everything about them. And none of that was happening. I didn't walk up to people and say, oh, I can see your dead granny behind you or anything like that. Um, so I was reading all these books that was not standard reading material, and that sent me off in all sorts of tangents. And then when I was in my 20s, somebody told me that I was psychic. And I was like, fantastic. Now what do I do? So that wasn't actually very helpful. So I went and learned to be a spiritual healer. I did Reiki. I sat in a development circle learning how to understand my spiritual senses, because we're all wired so differently. And of course, when we're comparing ourselves to other people, we're probably going to end up just going, oh, well, I don't get that, so clearly I'm not. And of course, the book, The Celestine Prophecies, I don't know if you guys remember that, back in 96, it was huge. And that really blew my world open wide and really pushed me into needing to know more about reincarnation, soul contracts, being psychic, how to do psychic readings, understanding the tarot, you name it. So to me, life was just a smorgasbord of things to investigate back then. And later, I think it was my mid 30s, my financial services business died in the recession, and I had nothing else to fall back on because I didn't have any other qualifications. I'd done that for a long time. Um, and so my friend said, well, just get your tarot cards out then. So I did. And here I am nearly 20 years later. So it obviously was the right thing to do.
A lot of people want to find a connection to something else or questioning whatever it is that they're questioning. And I love how you say like a smorgasbord of just information out there that you can tap into and sort of start to research and start to learn. So there is so much information out there, and some of it is not good information, and of course some of it is really good information. So for others who are looking at the smorgasbord of stuff to do, it can feel extremely overwhelming. And it's like, how do I know which direction to go into? How do I know what it is that I need to look at? Can you just sort of just help to peel away a little bit? Because when you're confronted with so much information and you are looking, you can get drawn down a path that might not be the right path. So can you just sort of maybe just help our listeners to help them peel through those layers, or just separate the small off the board, so to speak, to try and see what can be more helpful? Because you can sometimes spend a lot of time going down the wrong path and then realizing, hang on a minute, time out, this isn't it. And it's not necessarily the right one, but that they don't get trapped in something that is really not the right path to go on. And I know we all step off the path sometimes and find our way, but I'm talking especially when you're looking for those answers and you're looking for a more spiritual path, you can get led down a path that can really do a lot of harm. And so
Mm,
it's more just to maybe just help some of our listeners not go too far down that path. I'm hoping that
yeah,
question makes sense.
it does make total sense. And I guess if I wanted to, I could say, I've taken a lot of wrong turns as well, but I also don't believe they're wrong turns. So the first thing I would say is we are never going to learn everything about everything that's out there in this life, the next life, or in between lives. Not going to happen. Even if you just wanted to delve into crystals, the late, great Judy Hall was still discovering new crystals, new uses, new energies right up until she died. And I think she might have been in her 70s or even her 80s. So that was just one subject. Okay. So I believe that there are just some subjects that we're not drawn to. Like, I've got crystals, I sometimes dabble with them, but it's not my passion. But I know a little bit about crystals. So if somebody came to me for a reading and they said, look, I'm having problems. Every night I go to bed and I wake up in the morning and I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do. I would say, well, maybe they've got you working on the astral planes. I'd recommend some smoky quartz. Or I would say, look, do you know what? I think you need a crystal for that. Go speak to the crystal person. It's not my forte, okay? But I know enough to point them in the right direction. And sometimes literally people have come to me for a reading and it's not really specifically the reading that they need, but I'm the connection to that person and I need to get them to that person. So I would firstly say, pick the things you're drawn to. Don't try and learn everything about everything because you're never going to do it. Secondly, I do believe that we're signposted. So as a child, I remember sitting with my cuddly toys and my dolls, and I would play schools and I would play librarians because I'm a massive bookworm. I never wanted to be a teacher. That never ever hit my radar. Okay. But fast forward, and I teach people how to develop their abilities. So the teacher in me was there and already showing up. The healer was there because for years I wanted to be a nurse and then realized that was just really hard graft. And honestly, there's got to be an easier way to achieve the outcome. And so the healer in me was already showing up. Then there were other little flags that I look back now and I can see that I'm using them now, but not in the way that my careers advisor probably would have predicted. So let's say, for instance, if you either personally or people around you, there's a theme of, say, mental health issues or physical health issues, or just that you always end up the problem solver and the agony aunt in your friendship groups, then you're probably the healer and you would probably be best off looking to Reiki, hypnotherapy, counseling, NLP, anything that grabs you. Okay. Also, a lot of people, the stuff that has happened to them, like the thing at the moment seems to be the amount of people that have been in relationships with a narcissist. That's just like off the charts. So are these people meant to come out the other side of that and then look to the spiritual world to understand why that's happened? Whether they're meant to be helping other people recover from a narcissistic relationship, whether they are here to write a book about it, whether they're here to understand soul contracts and reincarnation and soulmates and all of that. So I would look at what's happened to a person and think, right, let me go and find what's in the spiritual world that connects with that. How can I bring the two together? And it's quite often way more simple than people think. But what I would say is, even if you're not interested in working as a spiritual person or holistic services or anything like that, just being able to navigate life by using your intuition is such a transformational thing. And a lot of the ladies that I work with, they literally only want it to make sure they're living their life and they're on the right path. They're not interested in doing tarot readings or healing necessarily, although quite often they end up there. So start with yourself. Look at how you can use the spiritual to help yourself, and it will lead you. The breadcrumbs will just be there. And so I wouldn't get too hung up. And I've been there. It's like, I need to know my soul purpose. I need to know my life purpose. What am I here for? I was already doing it, but I was getting really bent out of shape trying to find it, even though I was doing it. So sometimes we need to just stop and look at what's going on now rather than trying to figure out where we're meant to be.
I love this. This is wonderful. And it touches on something that we, from many different conversations, keep reminding ourselves and our listeners. And for me, it is one of the big lessons of, this podcast and life, is realizing that we often are not taught how to listen to our intuition, that in
Yeah.
this world we often are, from the moment we're born, we are raised to listen to others and seek advice from and respect the opinions of our parents, our teachers, our bosses, our influencer, our leaders. And so little, at least in my experience, was trust yourself, trust your gut, you are right, understand yourself, what do you truly want? So for lots of people, it can be very much rational and very brain powered
Mm.
of who am I, like the thinking of who am I, what is right, what is wrong, what is my path, where a lot of what you're talking about and where then the magic lies is the connecting with our body, with our breath, with our heart, with our gut, with our nervous system. So, do you have any tips for people who may feel this way, the way I used to feel, where everything just comes from the head? Everything is about thinking, and I need to figure out, and I need to learn more, and I need to read more, I need more podcasts. Thank you for listening to this podcast, but there are things I'm sure that people can do after they finish this podcast to learn more about their themselves through simply being with themselves or having practices
Mm.
and having experiences for themselves to unlock a bit more again of this gut feeling and intuition.
Mm. Definitely. Wow, where to go with that one? So I encourage people to value intellect, but not to give it priority because our society values intellect and logic, even when a lot of things make no sense. Like, why have you fallen in love with the partners you've fallen in love with? Why did you not fall in love with one of their siblings or their best friends? Okay, so it's not logical, it's energetic. Okay, and so the world wants us to be logical. And as I joked earlier on, my careers advisor never told me about being a tarot reader or a psychic. It was never an option. Okay. And if you listen to the amount of famous people who were told by their careers advisors, go and be a teacher or a lawyer, you'll never make it as an actor or as a band member or a singer or whatever. And lo and behold, loads of them have. So a lot of the things that are intuitive don't make sense to other people. And so just weird things like we can be driving along and this little thought pops in the head and says, oh, I think I need to come off at the next junction. And then the logic kicks in and goes, oh, yeah, but you never come off at that junction and you'll only hit the local traffic. Come off at the junction afterwards, like you always do. And then what happened? I ended up in traffic. And if I'd have come off at the junction that I was prompted to, I wouldn't have sat in that traffic. It was only 10 minutes extra. It's not the end of the world. But that little prompt is there. We don't have to suddenly go and wear tie-dye and be all woo-woo just because we're listening to that intuition. Okay. And I always say, anyone who's a mother or a father, if they got some kind of nudge that there was something wrong with their kid or someone else that they loved about, they would walk over hot coals. But because it's more often than not about the mundane stuff, like should I take a jacket? Should I take an umbrella? Oh, I don't want to go to that party. We don't listen to it as much. And I think the big thing that I'm realizing through working with so many people is that intuition is much more subtle than the doubts, fears, and ego. Okay. And as I said at the start, everybody is wired differently. But for me, when my intuition communicates with me, it's like this little quiet voice at the back of my head in the lower right quadrant. When it's ego, it's a loud voice in my left temple, and it's so loud. So I've learned that that whisper has my best interest at heart, whereas that loud one does not. It just wants to keep me safe, but not necessarily in a way that suits me. So I encourage people to find little ways that are not life and death situations to make intuitive, to build the trust bank. I call it the trust bank. So if you're waiting for the elevator or the lift, whatever you call it, ask your intuition which one's going to come first. And don't be swayed by the one that says it's on the next floor up, because they might be moving furniture and that's going to be half an hour. So get rid of the logic. Just let your intuition. And it might be immediate. It might be gentle. And just let it unfold. The other day I had my guys focused on the Oxford and Cambridge boat race in the UK. It's an annual event. And I just got them to tune in and see who they felt was gonna win. And I actually messed it up. I messed it up. Okay. So we have a men's race and we have a women's race. And I hadn't actually sat with my intuition. I was busy doing stuff. And as I was getting a glass of water, I got this flash of duck egg blue, which I knew was one of the team colours, but I couldn't remember which one, so I had to go and Google it. So I told my group, oh, it's going to be Cambridge and they're going to win. Brilliant. It was only after the race, and actually Oxford won the ladies and Cambridge won the men's. And I'm like, oh, I didn't actually finish that off. I didn't work out if that duck egg blue was for the women's or the men's. So it is so easy to go awry. And I know what I'm doing. Most of the time I listen and it's fine. So it's not life and death. It's a bit of fun, but it's those little things that build that trust. And I get people to journal about it, not War and Peace, just little notes, because if you go through your journal and you can see how many times you've been right for listening to your intuition, or when you didn't listen, what happened, you'll build that trust bank. Because if you can see that 19 out of 20 times you were right, and those ones where you weren't right, you can work out why you weren't right, or did you just not listen, and that will build the trust bank. So it takes a little bit of work and exercise, because it's just not valued. Like, how many times do you watch a police procedural and the police will go, oh yeah, my gut hunch is so-and-so did it. Well, you can't take that to a magistrate, you know. And the same with lots of other things. It's like, oh, you know, it's a hunch that I think there's a problem in the bladder. Well, you don't have an MRI scan or an X-ray, so no one in their right mind is going to take that as gospel. So it's just something that we have to build until we get to the point where we trust ourselves and it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. And I often say to people, look, don't explain to anyone else that you intuitively feel you should do this or shouldn't do that. Just follow it, because you can't explain it to someone else. They will just go, oh, she's mad, she's flaky, you know, she's decided she's not coming to the party because the energy's wrong or whatever it is. So, you know, sometimes when you try and explain it, it just puts you in a big hole, and it's just easier just to go, no, I'm not going to do it. Okay. So it is a case of little things every day that will give you that trust and that belief in what that intuition is communicating to you. And then it gets easier from there.
And of course, listening to your intuition can help with some bigger questions, or, you know, like, should I take that job, or which, you know, is that job going to be right for me, or is it time for me to leave the job and start my own business, or, you know, that house or this house. You know, it can, if you've learned to trust yourself, you can then sort of start to make the bigger life decisions that we all have to make. It's, you know, a few times in our lives, or once in our lives, or whenever. And it can also help with meeting other people, because
Mm.
then you really start to, oh, hang on, this person isn't right for me. But yes, they tick all the right boxes, and you can often
Mm.
bypass and then realize that that person wasn't right for you. But if you don't listen to
Yeah.
yourself, so whether it's friendships, colleagues, going into business with somebody, a partner, you still, when you meet people, your instinct or your gut or your heart does tell you something. But as you said, we have been brought up in a way that, no, it's all the logic. You can question stuff, and it's something that I've done for a lot of years of my life. Is I could talk myself out of anything and everything, even a good thing, and I could find ways to logic something. So if I decide, oh, hang on, I need to do this, I will then find myself talking myself out of it, because for random reasons, and then I don't follow through. And I'm looking
Mm.
back, it's like, maybe my brain should have shut up and you
Yeah,
know
absolutely.
let the heart speak. But the thing is, it's something I've had to learn, and I'm still learning to
Mm.
not allow that logical brain to override sort of me, my gut, my instinct, and sort of really who I am. Because yeah, the brain knows best. Well, not always,
No, it
but
doesn't. No.
it's something I've had to learn over the years, to really find a way to not allow it to take over. And it's not
Mm.
it's not an easy process, because as you said, that instinct is a quiet whisper, whereas the logic is screaming at the top of their voice. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're gonna listen to it because it's the loudest, and it's almost, in
Mm.
your face. If you picture somebody standing in your face screaming all the logical stuff, and then you got somebody in the far corner just whispering, you're just going to be
Yeah.
focused on this face going at you. So
Yeah.
it's learning to, like, hang on, step aside. I want to see what that
Yeah.
person's got to say. So
Yeah.
yes, it's a process. It is a journey, and it's learning to trust ourselves. And it comes
Mm.
down to the trust. It's something that we are not taught to do, to trust ourselves. We're almost taught to not trust ourselves, because what do
Yeah.
we know? First of all, what do you know? You're a kid. What do you know? You're just a teenager. What do you know? You new in this job. What do you know? What you know that by the time you're 40, 20s, 30s, 40s, you saying to yourself, what do you know? How can you
Mm.
know this? Because you've been told all your life, what do you know? How can you know it? Because you're too young, to this, to this. So
Yeah.
when the
Oh,
time comes
absolutely.
that we want to trust, there's that voice going, what do you know? How can you know
Hmm.
that?
Yeah.
You shouldn't know that. Whatever the things that come up in your those limiting beliefs, is that it's very, very difficult to trust. And of course, we also live in an environment and in a world that is not based on trust. So even
Yeah.
when you look out there, there's a lot of distrust as opposed to
Mm.
trust. So it's like, yeah, but the whole world's like this. So how can I then trust myself? Because everything is distrust. So there's a lot of this conflict as well that comes in, and then the
Mm.
questioning, and then, with that face in front of you. That's how I see it. This face in front of me going. Meh, 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 meh.
Mm.
So the thing is, it's really learning to build that trust in yourself. And I like those tools that you're given. Journaling, and really starting to find ways to do it. And I think one of a big tip that you shared is, don't necessarily explain why, just do it.
Mm.
Because quite often when you
Yeah.
do explain why, other people's big voices then start in your face as well, because they
Mm.
don't necessarily understand where you're coming from. And they also having all that conflict that you're going through with the trust and everything else. So it's just, why are you doing it? I'm just doing it because, just shush, I'm off.
Yeah.
instead of trying to
Yeah.
explain that it's something that you feel is right or you just know, that doesn't always sit well. So it is, I think that's a really good tip, is just do it without explaining why you're doing
Yeah.
it, and then
Yeah.
just get on with it. So thank you for those, because I think those are really important lessons or tips for us to really understand, and for our listeners to, like, okay, sometimes you've just got to be quiet about something. It's not to hide it,
Mm.
but just to shelter yourself from all the distrust or all those logics. A lot of logic out there, a lot of logic. You
Oh yeah,
can,
way too
be
much.
thrown dead with logic, but it's not about logic. Sometimes it is about gut and feeling and just knowing. And that can be really difficult to quantify in a way. Yeah, because I know. Yeah, but why do you know? Yeah, but I just know. And that's when I
Mm.
think that conflict can come in, especially if you are trying to explain to other people who are maybe not as far along as you and learning to find their trust in themselves. So thank you. I think those are
Yeah.
really important for all of us. I mean, Link and myself, I mean, both of us, we still have that. And we've been doing a lot of work over the years. We've spoken to so many wonderful guests, and sometimes even we fall short. So it's always a good reminder to, like, yeah, hang on a minute. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that.
That's okay.
So, with all of what we've spoken about, are there any sort of tools or authors or practices that you find for yourself and for your clients that really help to start to tap into this self-trust and this listening to? I know you didn't mention journaling, but is there anything sort of for those logical brainy people who like to read or like to learn? Is there some direction that you can help them with, just to help them to learn for themselves? I hope that
Okay.
question makes sense.
It does, yeah. So I think that if you're going to read, I'm a massive bookworm. I love books, but you're only getting one person's perspective. If you join a development circle and learn how you're wired and how other people are wired, you can go, oh, they do that. I get that as well. Oh, cool. So having other people to compare yourself to can be a positive as well as a negative. Um, and I think if you're going to read, you've got to read more than one book so you get different perspectives. You're not going to learn everything from one author, because just to randomly pick an author like Sonia Choquette, who is a spiritual coach, she works the way that she works. She's not necessarily going to work the way that you do. So if she's writing from her perspective, you might be going, well, I don't get that. That never happens to me. And then you go, oh, well, I'm obviously not intuitive. No, you just don't work that way. And I always say it's like making a cake, whether you chuck all the ingredients in the bowl or whether you cream the sugar and the butter and then add the eggs and then add the flour, you're going to end up with the same cake. It doesn't matter how you get there. It's about identifying the ingredients that make up the cake. And so definitely learning through journaling, excuse me, because when we journal, we can reflect back on it. So let's say, using my one about coming off at the different exit, if I'd have put that in my journal, I could have looked at that and gone, well, where did I go wrong? Well, I went wrong because my logic said, oh no, just carry on, it'll be fine. If I'd have listened, I'd have been home 10, 15 minutes earlier. It wasn't the end of the world. So when you reflect over it, you can look at the point, well, do you know what? I didn't really take to that new person in the office. They've not done anything wrong. They've got no reason. And everyone else is going, oh, they're lovely. They're really lovely. I don't know why you don't like them. Then something happens and you go, now I know why I don't like them. but you'll have forgotten that train of thought. Whereas if you put it in your journal, when you're flicking back, you'll go, oh my God, yeah, there's where I wrote about that new person. And then, I don't know, they turned out to be someone who was going to stab someone in the back to get their job. I knew I didn't like them. Okay. So journaling is huge. I also recommend using tarot cards or oracle cards or angel cards, whichever ones you're drawn to, and just pick a card for the day and journal about it. If it doesn't really resonate, or you're kind of going, I really don't see how that fits for me, don't worry, come back to it at the end of the day and reflect on it and see what the guidance was. And you might go, oh, yeah, that the tower came up, and actually that's all about change and transformation. But that was actually my boss. My boss has just announced they're pregnant and they're going on maternity leave and blah, 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 blah. So then you can trust it. Whereas initially you just pull the card and go, oh, well, I can't take any of that. That's a load of rubbish. So again, it's building up the trust bank. If you want to pull it at the end of the day and reflect on the day, that's fine too. But sometimes you've got to think outside the box, and you do have to be honest with yourself, because we're terrible at deluding ourselves and telling ourselves what we want to hear. So let's say the moon comes up, and the moon is about being two-faced and deception and not seeing things right. So is that moon card telling you you've got to watch your colleague because they're not what they're making themselves out to be, or that you've got the wrong end of the stick over something, or you're just flat out deluding yourself and telling you you're going to go for that great big job with a big salary and it's going to be brilliant, but the part of you that's going, I can't do it, you're ignoring it, and then you're going to fall flat on your face and wish that you'd listened and not gone for the job. So using tools like that is really, really important. And all the things I've said before, like even just quiz shows, watch a quiz show, and if it's multiple guess, let your intuition tell you the answer if you don't know it, and don't let your brain talk you out of it, or your partner or anything else. And you'll be surprised how far you can actually get without knowing the answers. And so flex it on all those little things. Okay. Ask your intuition what to wear, and you might get a picture in your head or a feeling, or you might feel that fabric and go, oh, I need that shiny silky top. Okay, so however that information comes to you, and you know, there are 8 clairs, which are the psychic equivalent of the human senses. So sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, knowing, touching, sentience, and so on. So the information your intuition is feeding you might be all of those or some of those. Okay, and so it might show you a picture of yourself in a memory wearing blue. And you go, why is it showing me a memory from 5 years ago? It's like, the memory's not important. It's the fact that you're wearing blue. Get the blue out, okay? So there's lots of little micro habits we can put into a day to get us to that point where it flows and we trust it and we don't question it. And the thing to remember is, when you share intuition with someone else, are they intuitively switched on? Because if they're not, that's not going to help you, because they'll just go, well, don't know where you got that from. Okay. That's like asking your risk averse friend whether you should go and do red 32 at the casino, and they're going to be like, hell no. Okay. So there's just way more hassle by sharing your intuition with the wrong people. Doesn't mean they're bad people, but there's no point me ringing up my best friend who's super logical and grand and go, oh my God, I just had the most amazing meditation. And they'll be like, yeah, okay, great. What time are you meeting for a beer later on? You know, it's not the right person. I need to ring up my super intuitive friend and go, oh my God, I just had this amazing meditation. What do you think? And they'll be like, oh, wow, that was really cool. And you're going to get a totally different response. So it's really just about working in your own space to be able to get yourself to a level where you trust it and act on it, rather than needing other people to validate it. If you want to ask someone to validate it, ask your spirit guides and your loved ones in spirit. It will be way more beneficial. And they are really good, actually, once you get to communicate with your spirit guides to help you validate, to give you trust, to give you the breadcrumbs that you can follow. So don't negate your spirit guides.
This is absolutely beautiful, so helpful. I love the advice of, practice, pay attention, try different things. Like, it's a muscle. And I always like the reminder of so many of the things are just all about the practice and the muscle and strengthening our sense. But it also got me
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the other side of the coin, or the t other type of people who may be on the other side of the spectrum, who may be extremely sensitive from childhood, who could feel and tell things. And again, society quite likely has been suppressing them, like, you're too much, and they feel overwhelmed. What advice would you give to people, or how do you then work with people who may be on the opposite spectrum, either suppressed it and again need to probably more feel safe to unlock it, rather than they don't need necessarily the tools to unlock it, but they need help to manage it once they let loose, or those who are really feeling like something, it can happen over time that something is triggered and out of nowhere they're really receptive. And it's a lot. They're extremely sensitive. They're really realizing how empathetic, how sensitive, how perception, how much perception they have of these things. And it can be scary and overwhelming. So is there any advice
Mm.
then you would have for people on the other side of the spectrum?
Yeah. So again, journaling. um, because when you're so intuitive and you're like the polar opposite of logical, that's not good either. Definitely learning to ground so that your energy is grounded, learning to protect your energy so you're not overwhelmed by environments or people or emotions, etc., and kind of calming the system down and helping them to understand that what they're getting is normal. It's just too much, and they need that balance between the logical and the intuitive. And actually what we're really aiming for is to fuse the two hemispheres of the brain so that there's not just the bridge in the middle, there's like the solid two halves. And so neither one is right or wrong, but we need to be able to know when to be logical and when to be intuitive. And so by helping them to calm down, by helping them to pick out the different strands, so the voice, the sight, the smell, the taste, and just being able to bring it into one, because otherwise it's a little bit like having the equivalent of PTSD. Because when you have PTSD, the memories are broken down. So, you might hear a bang and that triggers your PTSD because that sound is connected to it, that smell is connected to it, and so on. But the brain files them in different places, which is why you only need one of the triggers to set off the explosion. And it can be the same with your clair senses. If you've got too much coming at you, everything's being triggered, but it's not cohesive. So we find a way then to calm it down. And this is where calming down and re-regulating the system is important, because we live so much in fight, flight, and freeze. We don't spend enough time in rest and digest. So I always try and get people to calm down their system so that they are present enough that they can just be in the middle of it. And it's almost like it's floating past. It's like, oh yeah, there goes an image. I need that. Oh, there's a feeling that goes with that. Oh, that's part of that as well. Rather than having so much going on, but you don't know how it connects, and it just is noise. And it can give you like the same equivalent of ADHD, because it's just like, I can't switch off. So it is important to calm the system down and pull everything into alignment.
It makes sense to just, rest and digest. I love that. And it's about just finding ways. And I guess a lot of people who are now realizing they are much more receptive and maybe even a Claire, but have suppressed it because maybe as a child they said something and the parents' eyes maybe popped out the head and they're like, oh my God, don't ever do that. Don't, then you just shut that door. And then
Mm.
as an adult or over years, you've kept that door tightly shut, and then there can be a point where it just opens up and you're like, what's happening? And yes, I
Yeah.
guess it's just finding a way to sit with it, but also not to feel bad about it. It's You're not wrong. You're not a bad
Mm.
person. There's nothing, you're not broken. You are who you are, just allowing this something is not new, something that's part of you that you've suppressed all these years, and
Mm.
learning to be okay with that, because it's not always a good idea to go into a shop or wherever and say, oh, by the way, I can see your granny behind you, she's got this to tell me.
Yeah.
She's some random stranger. They're going to look at you and it's like, okay, which loony bin did you escape from? And you're going to
Yeah.
get this. So it's how do you see something or feel something and not react to it, because obviously
Mm.
you just can't go up to random strangers and give them messages from
No.
somebody who's passed on, or knowing something about them that you can't. Our society doesn't allow that. I know that there was a time when people were looking for it, but now it doesn't allow it. So it's like, okay, I've got all these things happening. I'm
Mm.
weird, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're just connecting to another part of who you are. And I think then having that logical, there's something wrong with me, and the realization, no, this is who I am. And then learning to really embrace that, because if we fight who we are, that then causes a lot of problems, whether physical or mental, because we then not being true to ourselves. And I think a lot of sort of awakening in a way can cause this conflict in yourself, because we've been brought
Mm.
up, no, that's wrong. You don't say things like that. Are you nuts? To realizing, yeah, this is happening. What do I do? But you've still got this, are you nuts? Are you
Mm.
weird? What's wrong with you? Going on, and then you've got that conflict. So I think it's really important, as you said, the rest and digest, the journaling, and really
Mm.
knowing you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with
Mm.
you. You're just stepping into who you are. You are really embracing more of who you are, because I know
Mm.
you chose to try and find this. You were looking for it. Some people it's just
Mm.
thrown in their faces and it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
now what?
You see, also, boundaries are hugely important because a lot of people, when they come to me to develop, they're getting messages at 3 a.m. And it's like, would you take a call from your boss at 3 a.m.? And they're like, hell no. It's like, you need boundaries. You have to tell your guides, I will only work between these certain times, or I only want you to come when I'm in a development circle, or whatever it is. And the same with spirit. You can't be letting them in your life every 30 seconds, or, wander up to some stranger and go, oh, your dead father's telling me blah, blah, blah. That's not on. That's really poor etiquette to do that. But also, you've got to balance your human and your spiritual self. So you have to be able to define what happens when. And, us empaths, we love a good concert. You shove us in a concert and we'll probably be off our faces like we've just drunk the contents of the beer lounge, because we're like, yay, this is amazing. And the euphoria that everyone's experiencing, going, oh my God, my favorite group and they're brilliant, is great. But then the flip side is, put us in Oxford Street or wherever in the middle of Christmas shopping, and you've got this tsunami of emotion like, oh my God, my in-laws are coming. Oh, I can't wait for Christmas to be over. Oh, I can't afford Christmas. I've got no money. There's like this tsunami of negativity. And so being in a crowd like that is hell. So learning to close down and to have your shields up so that you're not being bombarded with the triggers is a massive tool as well. And, depends on your job. Like, let's say you're a nurse and you work in a hospital, there's going to be a lot of negative emotions around that. But at the same time, you need to be open, because you do want to know about your patient. You do want that hunch that tells me, I feel like this person's being abused, but they're not telling me that, so I've got to press the buttons for them to go, oh, well, yeah, I'm being abused, but I didn't think that that was important, so I didn't mention it. And the same if you're a counselor, you know, you don't want all the negativity, but you need that connection to get the intuitive stuff that you need to work with. So again, it's about balance and boundaries, and environments. You know, even if you just pick somewhere like, I'm trying to think of somewhere fairly neutral. I mean, just being in a doctor's surgery, you know, just sitting there waiting to see the doctor because you've got, I don't know, an ear infection. The amount of emotional build-up in that environment, as an empath, you're going to walk in and go, God, get me out of here, you know? So then you want to close down so that you're not being affected by it. So I would definitely say boundaries. And what I tend to find is whatever's going on in our human life, that's going to show up in your spiritual life. So if you've got an issue with boundaries with your spirit stuff, I can lay odds you've got an issue with boundaries in your personal life. So you might as well just go and work on the boundaries and your life will improve no end. So definitely having boundaries with yourself and with others is really important.
Boundaries are always good because we
Yeah.
so easy to just say yes when we actually screaming at ourselves going no, no, no. But so boundaries are really important just to help us in our daily lives, let alone
Yeah.
then also dealing with all the other stuff. So thank you for that
Yeah.
reminder.
That's okay.
This is the part in the episode that we call the gold nuggets. So this is where we ask, Tracy, may we please have your gold nuggets?
Okay. So my gold nugget would be, it's not up for question whether you are intuitive. You are intuitive, you're a spiritual being having a human existence. The key is learning how your intuition works so that you can work with it in the best way. The same as when you're in school, everybody learns differently. Some people are visual, some are auditory, some people need to be doing it, which we call kinesthetic. And it's the same with our intuition, okay? Yours might be auditory, it might be a gut hunch, it might be a feeling. So really unpick how you're wired. And when we get that intuitive hunch, whether we do anything with it or not, recognizing how that unfolded and going, ooh, that was like a doom in my stomach. That means whatever. You've already ticked one of the boxes. So the best work anybody can do is to understand which of their clairs are working the strongest, which ones are not the strongest, or are more infrequent because we don't use all of them all of the time, and figure out how to strengthen those ones that are not your strongest, because we tend to miss the subtle. We get the wet fish in the face and go, oh yeah, I'm clairvoyant, but then we miss that subtle clair knowing because it's so subtle. So really work on understanding how that intuition communicates with you, and you've already sorted over 50% of the problem.
This is why we love our gold nuggets. We always get something really beautiful and valuable and precious. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. Now, for our listeners, if they're wanting to learn more, find out more about you, about what it is that you do, or they just want to be in your circle, where can people find you?
Okay, so I'm mostly on Facebook, although I am on Instagram and a little bit on TikTok. On Facebook, you can join me on my page. I've also got a group which is for anybody that knows they're spiritually awake. And basically, my belief is if you're remotely interested in anything spiritual, you're awake. Okay. And you can just lurk in there. We pull cards daily and reflect on them. We talk about different things and we do some lives. If you want something a little bit more proactive, I've got my membership site where I put content, we have guest speakers, and I give you all the tools that you need to be able to hone those clairs, develop your intuition, understand a ton of spiritual stuff, because I'm really passionate about all the stuff behind it, like the reincarnation, the soul contracts, and things like that. So it depends on what people want. Okay, but come and say hi on Facebook, and we'll soon figure out what it is that I can do to help you, and we'll get you on your path. So just come and say hi.
That's wonderful. And obviously, all those links will be in the description below, so people can just come and click and connect with you and find you wherever they feel like they feel intuitively inspired to be connected. Thank you so much
Excellent.
for
Yeah.
all of the wonderful information, insights, encouragement that you've given us today. On this podcast, we're slightly greedy and we're always trying to squeeze in a little bit more from our guests. We always try to squeeze in one last question. And I always remind ourselves, our guests, and our listeners that this podcast is our mission is to discover different ways of living happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. It's about leaning more into our lives. And I'm always curious to know what gives you life right now, what it is that really allows you to lean more into your life.
I kind of feel like I'm in the role of student because I'm on my path, I'm learning, I'm still discovering all sorts of new wonderful things. And I just kind of pass on that knowledge. So I'm the teacher, the mentor, as well as the student. I don't pretend to know everything, not even anywhere close, but I do love sharing whatever I am discovering with other people so that if it can help them as well, then brilliant.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing your energy with us today, sharing your time and knowledge, and just helping us and our listeners to get a little bit more of an understanding, but a different perspective as well on the spiritual journey, because it can feel like as you said earlier, a smorgasbord of stuff. And it's always nice to hear a person on that journey, their perspective, because it can just help with something. So thank you so much for just sharing your energy with us today.
That's okay. It's been a joy. Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, what have you got today? Is this a journey that you are just starting to dabble in and starting to think, hang on a minute, there's something more out there? Or are you far down the path and really digging deep and you've aimed on one specific thing, crystals, tarots, or anything like that? We would love to know your journey. We would love to know your thoughts and especially what aha moments you've got from today's conversation. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.